Welcome to Madame Raven's. This way to the library. She's been expecting you.
The Ghosts of Glastonbury Mountain by MythologyLoveHorror. Growing up in Vermont meant bonfires, Ben & Jerry's ice cream, the most beautiful autumn leaves, and the best maple syrup. It also meant the weirdness that is the region known as the Bennington Triangle, which I didn't learn about until the summer I turned 20. To this day, I wish I'd never found out about that cursed place. My best friend since childhood was Diane. She had always been an avid ghost hunter. She loved dragging me along to anywhere that was supposed to be haunted, even if we weren't allowed to be there. The Green Mountain Cemetery, Sabin's Pasture, and the Community College of Vermont were just a few of our many stops. I had never believed in the supernatural, and for most of my life I just thought that her midnight graveyard visits and trips to supposedly haunted buildings were a waste of time. My mind was forced to change in the course of a single night in 1983. Our junior year of college had started, and Diane proposed a weekend camping trip to one of the forests in the southern part of the state. She even promised that there wouldn't be any ghost hunting on this trip, which was a nice change of pace. I just wanted to relax for a few days out in nature before the harsh Vermont winter drove us to stay inside. A week after she set up the trip, we found ourselves in the middle of the woods outside the tiny town of Somerset, Vermont, on the morning of October 12th, as soon as we had set up a nice campsite. We planned to do some hiking and swimming while we were there, so the rest of the first day was spent in lazy bliss as we canoed, chatted, and fished. That night we cooked up the trout we had caught, and it was a peaceful night spent under the stars. I slept great and woke up feeling excited for our hike the next day. We got an early start on our trek up Glastonbury Mountain, and by late afternoon we had reached the summit. We rested at the top for a while and roasted some burgers over a small fire for dinner. We made sure to thoroughly extinguish the fire, and as the sun began to bleed out, we made our way back down the mountain on the side that would bring us closer to our camp. I wasn't looking forward to hiking in the dark, but I knew I would be fine just as long as I wasn't alone. Diane and I had also made sure to wear bright colors, myself in neon yellow and her in flame red, to make it easier to see each other. We had been extra smart and had expected to be headed back to camp in the dark, so we had headlamps ready to go when the last of the light faded. We had made it about a third of the way down when we heard the crying. I stopped mid-trail, scanning the area to see what it was. It was clearly the crying of a small child, not the woman-like cries of a mountain lion or some other animal. I had spent enough time in the woods to know the difference, and something about this cry unnerved me. Not a single person lived on the mountain itself, and we hadn't seen anyone at all in the time that we had been there. I strained my eyes, but I couldn't see any other flashlights or lanterns through the dense thicket. I thought I caught a glimpse of something red moving farther out among the trees, but it was gone as soon as I blinked. I turned back to ask Diane what she thought was going on, but she was heading off the trail and into the trees. I yelled at her to come back, but she refused, saying that she couldn't leave a kid alone in the woods. I tried to point out that a family was probably camping nearby, but she ignored me and kept walking towards the sound. Against my better judgment, I followed, hesitating before I stepped off the trail. I didn't want her running through the inky wilderness and getting lost or hurt, but neither did I feel comfortable going off trail in a place that neither of us knew. Within 10 minutes, I regretted my decision. I'd been able to see her for the first few minutes, but then I lost sight of her shirt. Even the sound of her rapid footsteps crunching the dead autumn leaves began to fade, and no amount of shouting had brought her back. I was listening, trying to pinpoint any sound, when I saw a flash of red out of the corner of my eye. I was so relieved that Diane had returned that I whipped around, a grin on my face. My relief was immediately replaced by confusion. No one was there. And after a few seconds, it dawned on me that I still hadn't heard a sound. A moment later, a tug on my sleeve made me scream. I looked down in horror, my heartbeat drumming in my ears, and I saw a little boy in a red jacket. He was looking up at me with huge, tear-filled eyes, and I felt my fear soften slightly. "Hey, kid, where are your parents at?" "I don't know. Mommy was here, but now she's not." I crouched down to eye level, making sure my headlamp wasn't blinding him. "What's your name?" "Paul." "I'm Jeanette. It's nice to meet you, Paul." He stuck out his hand like a little adult, and I shook it with an amused smile. He was a cute kid, and for the first time I was glad we'd gone off trail to find him. "Let's go look for your mom and my friend, okay?" He nodded trustingly and slipped his hand into mine. I had no idea which direction to take, so we made our way further into the dense woodland. I kept going in a straight line from the path, and we made sure to call for Diane and his mom every few minutes. I was getting more and more nervous about going deeper into the forest, but I still couldn't bring myself to abandon my friend. Nearly 2 hours later, we ran into the trail again, and it was very close to our campsite. I was hoping that Diane had been smart enough to wait there for me if she had made it this far. I was extremely worried at this point. We both had small flare guns on us in case of an emergency, and that was the only thing that assured me that she was still okay. I got a fire going. Since Paul's hand was frigid, I offered to warm him up some cocoa. He politely declined and curled up in a camping chair by the fire. I sat there in the other chair for about an hour, waiting for Diane to return. At some point I must have dozed off. When I woke, there was a woman by the fire with a weird blank look on her face. I blinked rapidly to shake the sleepiness from my eye, thinking she was a dream, but the figure remained. I was confused, and I began to panic when it dawned on me who she was. "Hi. You must be Paul's mom. I'm so glad you found us." "My name's Paula." "Oh, that's cute. You named him after you." "He is not my child." Sorry?" She hadn't moved, and the silence stretched tensely between us. I yawned and rubbed my eyes, since I thought I was seeing things. A darkness had begun to seep from her body, and at first I thought it was just the firelight casting odd shadows, or my eyes playing tricks. But it began to pool from her skeletal fingers on the ground. I swore, quickly scrambling out of the chair and away from her. By then I noticed that Paul wasn't in sight, and I screamed for him. The woman still hadn't moved, but the ooze had reached my tent. It began to dissolve the nylon, an acidic hiss warring with the crackling from the fire. I don't remember anything after that except for running towards the car and trying to explain to the police what had happened. They didn't believe me, of course. When we arrived back at the campsite, they blamed drinking and an unguarded fire for the state of my tent, even though there was no alcohol in my system. They began searching for Diane, but never found any trace of another person. 5 years later, her case went cold, and I wouldn't be writing this down if my 12-year-old nephew hadn't asked me for a school project he was working on about people who have seen ghosts. When I asked my nephew why he picked me to interview, he looked up at me, just like little Paul had done, and handed me an old, yellowed newspaper article dated October 14th, 1950. It showed a picture of a little boy in a familiar red jacket, and the headline was about his disappearance near Glastonbury Mountain on October 12th, 1950. My nephew tugged gently at my sleeve, his eyes wide as he stared at the tears flowing down my cheeks. "Don't cry, Auntie. Not everyone gets to meet 2 ghosts in one night." "2? Yeah, don't you ever go to the library?" I shook my head, and he exasperatedly pulled out a second article from his school folder. This one had a picture of a woman I'd seen that night, and it was about her disappearance from the same area in 1946. They had both been wearing red when they disappeared, and so had Diane. I know I'll never go back there, but if I were to, I believe that I would see 3 ghosts. So quoth this raven. I would like to thank my Patreon supporters, Ermin Case, Darren and Jennifer Daw, and Callist Enoch. And a big thank you to all of my darlings. I wouldn't be here without you, and I love when you come to spend time in my chateau. If you like this, please hit the little button to let me know. If you didn't, hit the little button to let me know. Leave a comment. I'm always glad to talk with you, my darlings. I'm open to suggestions and criticisms, critiques. If you have not subscribed, please do so and ring the little bell so you know when to come up and see me. And I will talk to you next time, my darlings. Farewell.